Good day, and thank you for joining Land and Property Focus, a show which is to help us learn, have discussions, and also be empowered when it comes to land property issues in Ghana. This show is going to help us all get involved and contribute, as well as educate, so people know exactly what pertains to issues that we have, and I guess opportunities as well. Please do follow our Facebook page and also do subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us to know that you are engaged, and then as well, if there is any information, we can then come straight to you. Today's title is Ghana at 64, our land and property journey. And it's very important that we celebrate 64 years of independence. We also take a stock of where we've come from. Many a time, I think we do not appreciate where we've come from and why our laws or our practices are actually what they are. And I think that an education on that would give us a better perspective or understanding of what we're actually dealing with if we do encounter any problems, or indeed, if we need to change what we actually have. As is customary with this show, it is my desire to also let people know what the laws are that relate to every discussion that we're going to have, or each show that we have. So today, I would share with you these two acts. We have the Land Act 2020, brand new, off the shelf. It is Land Act 2020 Act 1039. Now, this act has been on the shelves for a long time. One thing I want you to note is that 14 other laws have had to be cancelled, for lack of a better word, to make way for the Land Act 2020. So all the acts that I've got numbered A to N have now been repealed. The one I have underlined, which is Section 11 of the Survey Act 1962, is actually underlined because it's only that section that has been repealed. Everything in the Survey Act 1962 is still in force, so that you are aware, just in case you're dealing with any of these laws. Then we also have the Real Estate Agency Act 2020, Act 1047, which is also a very important act that has come into force. So if you do, in the future, we'll try and put this on our website so that you can all see them. But for now, I think they're generally available. But if you do want us to send you copies, then please do send us an email or a message, and we can send you copies of this act. Without much ado, I would shift on from here and bring on my guests who are joining me today for this show. So we have Mr. Rafiq Naah, who is a land information systems expert. And then, welcome, Rafiq.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Kodzo Aggor, and I think my flyers went out saying General Practice Surveyor. That's a bit more old school. He is a Valuation and Estates Surveyor. That's a new designation under the Ghana of the surveyors. So, Mr. Aggor, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Then we have Mr. Eric Osai Koranteng. Eric is also a valuation and estate surveyor as well as a lawyer. So, he's got two hats, as I attempt to do as well. And so he would also help us today with the discussions. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much, Nana.
So without much ado, the program today is going to cover, to mainly be, the beginning would be for the guests that we have to actually touch on specific subject areas. I am going to talk briefly about the history of our land laws, the most important ones, and how they affect our current dispensation. And then Mr. Naah is going to talk to us about the land administration project. Mr. Osai Koranteng is going to talk to us briefly or chiefly about the Land Act and the Real Estate Act. And Mr. Aggor is going to take us through what is currently happening. Because it's Independence Day. We want to trace the history and to follow how we got here. But we also want to know what is happening now. So things like the prices that are going and the changes that there are or these laws are going to come would be our main discussion points. So without much ado, I'll just go straight into the history. Now, our history of land nationalism actually started before the end of the last century, so around 1894 to 1897, when the colonial government actually wanted to take over our lands or the lands that were not occupied. They termed them as wastelands or public lands. And so John Mensah and his contemporaries fought to make sure that that did not happen. To a large extent, that is why we don't have the same land systems as you have in the east of Africa, where the British were also active. So that actually brought up the formation of the Aborigines Right Protection Society. And that society, with what it went on to become, is what actually led us to independence in 1957. So our earliest form of nationalism, feeling as a nation coming together to fight the colonial power, can be seen or has roots in land. And that is why I have decided to pick it from there. And then, so around that time, obviously, when we were able to fight, we were able to then keep our traditional land systems as we know them. And then, obviously, the British also kept their leaseholds and freeholds. In our modern times, I guess we have evolved to more of the British system than the traditional system, because a lot of the people have left the villages and all in the cities, and the growth of the country itself has changed those dynamics. But that is why we have those two systems operating. The British obviously owned the crown lands or the government lands, and they were primarily on leasehold and freehold basis, as is known in England. And the traditional land tenure systems, the usufructs and all that, were also there. So that led to, Mensah Saba wrote a book on Fanti customary laws, and that was just to show that we had a system of laws before the British or the Europeans came. And so we have had to take care of that, or that has been something that we have taken on. Then in 1914, I believe the West African Land Tenure Commission sat. The British were still looking at how we held our land, and I presume looking for ways of establishing themselves, much more than doing anything to promote West African land ownership. And one profound quotation made by a Nigerian chief was that land belongs to those who are living, those who are dead, and generations yet unborn. That quotation has informed what we actually currently have. There are, I think Professor Akwe made a commentary about this in the 70s about the fact that our constitution should actually have that in. So the fact that now we don't sell freeholds is actually influenced by that concept of landholding, which is a traditional concept in West Africa. So the West African Land Tenure Commission brought in that. Then we had independence in 1957, obviously flowing from the nationalism that we had, or the nationalism fervor that we whipped up with the Aborigines Right Protection Society, Mensah Saba, and his other nationalist-looking patriots of Ghana. And so we had, from 1957, it was pretty much uneventful. But if you look at our laws, there were a lot of laws that were enacted between 1960 and 1970, so most of which are being phased out. I think 14 or so of them would have been phased out by the Land Act 2020 alone. But it was a very active period of land law acts coming out. So we then moved on. The 1969 Constitution, the main thing in the 1969 Constitution was more of the fact that non-citizens could only own land for 50 years. And I think it flowed from the fact that we had people who were not citizens in Ghana at the time, and they owned land, and obviously because they were not citizens, they might have had to leave. And so those laws, where we have 50 years in the constitution now, actually started from that time. And then we have the 1992 constitution. So fast forward from 1914, where the West African Land Tenure Commission brought in the concept of land being owned by those who are dead, those who are living, and those who are yet to be born. We came to the 1992 constitution, which actually said that stool lands, skin lands could not be sold freehold. And there was obviously a leeway there, because family lands, not all lands belong to stools or skins. So families then started selling their lands freehold. And I believe that the Land Act 2020 has actually now plugged that loophole. Well, I wouldn't call it a loophole, but that plugged that hole. That essentially means that lands that are available to be sold in Ghana now would primarily be leasehold. If an individual owns freehold, then of course they can sell it. But essentially, that is all gone. And I think I must give credit to Professor AKP Kluje, who brought in that or challenged the issue that family lands could not be sold leasehold, and brought the opportunity for family lands to be sold freehold. But now it's all been taken out by the Land Act 2020. So I will go on straight to Mr. Rafiq Naah to talk about the land administration project, because that came after 1992 and was supposed to actually revamp the land sector, and he worked with them for a while, and therefore he has some information and or some knowledge. And so, Mr. Naah, if you can.
Yeah. Thank you, Nana, for that wonderful introduction and for your topic. Well, let's take a look at how we transacted lands before the land administration project. I think it was started in the late Kufuor's time or early, late Raleigh's time or early Kufuor's time. I'm not too sure about the exact date. But before that, the land sector agencies operated independently. So we had the Lands Commission, which was dealing with the state invested lands. We had the Land Title Registry, which was also an independent organization registering titles to land. We had the Survey Department, the Valuation Board, and then the Planning. Each of these agencies operated independently. So if you wanted to transact land, you had to interface with each of them independently until you complete your whole land transaction. And obviously, this was very inefficient. The bureaucracy, lack of coordination, unclear policies, and all of that made transactions in land very, very difficult. So the Kufuor government decided that we needed to streamline the processing of land transactions in Ghana, and that was the genesis of the land administration project. So it was divided into phases. The first phase was to bring all these independent agencies into one umbrella or into one big giant organization to deal with land transactions. So customers could just interface with one organization and go through all the processes to get their lands registered or for whatever land transaction you were dealing with. So the World Bank saw that it was a laudable idea, and then they sponsored it. A lot of other agencies or donor agencies joined in, and they provided money and resources to help in that. So by the end of, forgive me, I have forgotten about the exact date, but at some point, I think about 10 or so years ago, a law was passed that brought all the agencies together under one umbrella. So we don't have the land title registry anymore as an independent organization. We don't have the state-based, former Lands Commission as an independent organization. All of them are now in one giant single organization called the Lands Commission, and then we have all of these divisions within it. So the next phase was to streamline. Once you bring all of these independent agencies together, you will have to streamline their business processes. Of course, because they were operating independently, the way they did things will now be different under the new organization. So the Lands Administration Project was also tasked to look at all the business processes that these independent organizations were doing and redesign them to make sure that processes are now smooth and clear and most cost effective so we can get higher customer satisfaction in land transaction. I think this largely has also been achieved. Now, the next objective on top of this was to use technology to streamline or to implement these processes instead of allowing manual processes to go on. If you were to do a search, for example, in the previous organization, you have to go to Lands Commission and get a result, and then go to Land Title and get another report to be clear as to who owns what. But under the new system, if you at some point you have to use technology instead of going there and then you get the same service. So in a nutshell, this was the main objective of the land administration project, and it has been going on for quite a long time. Um, I don't know when it will end, but we hope that by the end of this whole project, you don't have to go, maybe you don't even have to go to the land commission anymore to do transaction. You should be able to submit an application from the comfort of your office using digital processes. Mensa Aggor will shed light on that. He has been interfacing with them under both under the old administration, and under the new organization. So he will tell us whether services have improved or not. But that is, in a nutshell, was the whole objective of the land administration project. Well, the last part was also to acquire more data. For example, if you want to register title to land, we need to have information, the geographic information about the location of your land. Now, this previous survey department was tasked with that, but logistical problems, they didn't have enough tools to go and do survey as fast as applications were coming in. So in order to facilitate that, the Land Administration Project took it upon themselves to acquire more geographic data. I mean, any place that was declared as a registration district, or even places that were under the map to become registration district, we were supposed to do all surveys of those places and place all of that information in the Land Survey Department's database. So when you apply for title to land, we are no longer going to go onto the field to find out. We should be able to use some address or some kind of just minimal information to retrieve that geographic information that will assist in your registration of land. So I think this is just the main objective of the land administration project. They have achieved so much of it. Currently, I understand that you don't have to submit paper documentation again at different independent places. We now have a one-stop shop where you can go and just submit your application, make all the payments, and you can even track it online. I may be wrong, but that is what I understand. So, yeah, this is that.
Okay, thank you very much for your brief. I think a lot of people don't know about the land administration project, and that is why I want to highlight it so we can ask and then we can see what progress they've made. We will come around to discussing the various issues that come out of these. But I think Mr. Osai Koranteng would now just, in a few minutes, give us a cover of the Land Act and then the Real Estate Agency Act as well, which are very brand new acts that we have on our books.
Okay, thank you very much. My duty this evening is to give you a snapshot of the Real Estate Act 2020 and that of the Land Act 2020. With the Real Estate Real Estate Agency Act, it seeks to sanitize the system and then also to regulate the real estate practitioners, their conduct. And also, that the real estate practitioners most of them do not have what they call the office accommodation. And most of them also do not have any form of training. And so this act seeks to address these thorny issues, right? The Real Estate Act, provides the real estate practitioners the need to be able to register and actually they are able to sort of record their transactions. The act is requesting the real estate agency to actually record transactions for tax purposes, and that it would rake in more revenues for the government, and also is also a giant step in terms of expanding the tax network, and then also the act seeks to sort of bring all these estate real estate brokers together. One very good thing about the act is that it mandates the council which the act establishes. It mandates the council to put together or bring together a database of real estate agency transactions. And that is a good thing, because you and I know that in this part of our world, real estate transactions are always shrouded in secrecy, and remains, confidential information. And so with this, a real estate act which, mandates the council to collate and bring together a database of real estate transactions, it would actually be of immense help to prospective buyers or prospective purchasers to be able to access, this database to be able to make informed decisions about purchases of properties. What I also have to say about, aside the good things of this act, is also the fact that there are some reservations that I think was inconsistent. The act is inconsistent with the existing laws. For instance, if you look at the Act 43, Section 43 of the Real Estate Agency Act, it says that a real estate broker shall, in relation to each real estate transaction, prepare or cause to prepare an appropriate sales and purchase agreement or lease agreement. And this is what I have an issue with all due respect to other professionals who fall under this category. The Act says that the licensed real estate brokers can prepare sales and purchase agreement, as well as prepare lease agreement.
I would disagree with you on that, but anyway, we will deal with that later on.
Let me develop my point, okay?
Okay.
The Act says that for a licensed real estate broker would have to sit for an exam, So when the person passes the examination, then to be licensed as a real estate broker, okay? And then also it talks about the real estate agency. The estate and estate surveying professional also would be licensed, as well as the lawyers, and even talks about the fact that those estate brokers who are outside the jurisdiction will also be licensed. But you know that the lease agreement, for instance, is a legal document. And once it is a legal document, if you look at the Legal Profession Act 1960, Act 32, it says that a person who is not a lawyer shall not directly or indirectly, for or in expectation of a fee, gain or reward, draw or prepare a legal document. So my beef here is that, with all due respect to, as I've already indicated, the other professionals in this category, it is quite inconsistent. with the laws that we have. And then also, let me even mention the fact that the Land Act, this new act, this new promulgated act, Land Act, also says in section 23 of the act that only qualified legal practitioners are to prepare conveyances. So I think that, aside the good things that the act brings on board, it's for the section 43, I think is inconsistent with the laws that we have. I mean, the Legal Profession Act and that of the Land Act. Now, let me move to the fine. Okay, let me also touch on one other thing as far as the reservation I have with the Real Estate Act is concerned.
Can we so the Real Estate Act, obviously it has, I guess it might have its issues, but in terms of educating the public about what it does, I guess you've touched on the very salient parts. So maybe we can just let's check the Land Act and see what the Land Act also provides, and then we can do this in the question and answer session. Because I think Mr. Mensah is waiting to actually answer that. So let's leave the faults in the Act for now, and then go on to the Land Act, and then we'll come back to it when we come to the discussion.
All right. Okay, so with the Land Act, I would want to touch on the spousal property. If we look at Article 22 of the 1992 Constitution, it says that, and 22.2 of the 1992 Constitution, it says that Parliament shall, as soon as practicable, after the coming into force of this Constitution, enact legislation regulating the property rights of spouses. And it strikes, or it is a notorious fact that Parliament, has reneged, or for want of better word, has failed to, legislate on this spousal property, even when the Constitution mandates, the Parliament to do so. But on the contrary, you realize that the courts have been consistent in developing the law with regards to spousal property. And there are a lot of cases, to that effect, moving from passing and passing and thing, and all other, cases that the courts have, given in terms of the spousal property. Now, the courts have moved. In fact, the courts have moved from the principle of substantial contribution, where at that point the court would only share a property of property acquired during the pendency of the marriage. The spouse will share when it is evident on records that the spouse has financially or substantially contributed to the acquisition of the property. Now the courts have moved from that principle and to the principle that once the property has been acquired during the pendency of the marriage, it is served as a joint property.
Okay.
And this principle was espoused in the case of Mensah and Mensah, and in fact the courts have all, even mentioned the fact that where a wife, for instance, takes care of the husband, takes care of the children at home, takes care of the laundry, hosts the husband's visitors, and even warm the bed, are all quantified in a form, and that that alone is a contribution that for instance the wife would have made towards the acquisition of whatever. So because that means that the man had the peace at home to be able to amass the wealth that the man has, and therefore the court would have the court will not hesitate to share the property with the spouses. And this principle of moving from the substantial contribution to where now once the property has been acquired during the pendency of the marriage, it is a joint property. And this has been reduced into the legislation in this Land Act.
So,
Act 2020.
just touch on where I guess, so what you're saying is that we've had the courts, the issues, the decisions in the courts have now been codified into the Land Act. And I guess that's so the main thing, and I think I've seen some commentary about the spousal property and all that, and we will touch on that when we get into the question and answer session. And I would say that those of you watching us, please send your questions coming so that we can deal with them, and as well we will deal with them at the end. So is there any other aspect of the Land Act in terms of highlights which you think is, just quickly, so that we all go on to Mr. Aggor as well?
Right. And one other thing I want to talk about the Land Act is the fact that you could see that there is a clear intention of curtailing that wanton dissipation of interest of land by families, by clans, by skins, and then by stools, in terms of large scale dispositions. And that is why in section 102 of the Act, it talks about where if the land that anybody intends to acquire, from a family, from a clan, from skin, or from stool, needs, if the land, for instance, if it is land for residential, then and the land is more than 10 acres, then you need the land registrar to consent to that before you be able to register. And where the land is for agriculture or for industrial, and it is more than 50 acres, you need the land registrar to be able to consent to that, before you can register. And so these are some of the hurdles the Act actually puts in place to prevent a disposition of large scale land to that belongs to a family, either family or stool or skin or clan. I think this one of the good things about.
So I guess I will just take a note here in terms of large scale land disposition. So I am sure that looking at the questions that are coming through, we would still have some more questions, and then perhaps you have the opportunity to expand. I think it is worth us actually having a full show discussing the Land Act, serializing it one by one so people can understand. So for the purpose of this show, and because today is our Independence Day, we've tracked the history of our laws to today. It's just a highlight so that people know, what has changed. So I think Mr. Aggor is dying to speak to us. So I would go on to him. He is going to talk to us about the current property market. What is happening in Ghana? What are the opportunities? What are the strengths? What are the threats? What are, what is happening? Because he is in private practice. And even though all of us here do have an appreciation for property valuation and all these things, I think he is better placed to actually give us a brief 5-minute cover of what is actually happening in the property market today.
Okay, thank you very much, Nana. The property market is a big market. Let me say, a market, like we all know, is where things are bought and sold. So the property market is where land is bought and sold. So we would say that the property market is not just one market. There's a property market for Accra, and there's a property market for Kumasi. It's a property market for Tamale. It's a property market everywhere you are. And also, even if you come to Accra, there's a property market for Dansuman, which is different or has different characteristics from the market in Medina, or for example in Dodowa. So that's how the property market works. And then the values or the prices of land, how is it determined? I would say generally it's by supply and demand. If you have land located in Dansuman and you put it on sale at a certain price, if it is too high, nobody will buy it. people will come to negotiate. I'll pay this, I'll pay that. So once you've sold it, that means that once you've sold it at a certain price, another person also sells around the same price. Then you can determine a certain trend and say that property values in Dansuman as maybe 100,000 Ghana cedis or 150,000 Ghana cedis. So that's how we say that prices on the market are generally determined. But normally we'll say that the prices or the values of property will say is land and anything attached to it. So we say property, we're talking about the land itself and then also buildings attached to the land. So building can be sold, and bare land can also be sold. So how is the value is determined? That's what I explained earlier on. It's also by demand and supply. And then people also wonder, maybe the values of property in Ghana are too high. Why is land in Ghana? I hear land in Ghana is sold for $100,000. I hear land in Ghana is this. Where I am,
another country abroad, the prices are different.
But we should, as I said earlier on, the property market is a market. So you can go to, there's a high-end market, there's a low-end market. So the high-end markets in Ghana, people can buy land for $200,000. There's land, just bare land of size, it's 100 feet by 100 feet, which is approximately 0.23 of an acre. I mean, bought, let's say, around somewhere in Ajingano for maybe $100,000 or $150,000. But the same land sold in another place like Medina will not be the same because of the characteristics of the land in Ajingano, the facilities available. Ajingano will have a good road, we have water, electricity, even telephone, a good school. So people are willing to pay more to live there. If you live in Ajingano or let me say East Legon, there's also prestige attached to it. So people want to stay where people don't buy property just for buying sake. Lots of people buy property for prestige, for social purposes, so they can enjoy it and also tell their friends that, well, I live here or I live there. So they're actually ready or prepared to pay a little more to live in a good neighborhood. So these are all factors which aid or affect the value of prices in various locations. And I would also say that some people also hear that somebody sold land at maybe 100,000 Ghana cedis in a certain location and think that they should also be able to sell land at that same price at a different location. But as I explained earlier on, the different locations are different. They are different markets. So the factors you have in one area is different from what is in another area. So you cannot expect to sell land at the same price as you did, as one person did at another place. Maybe your land is, even if maybe the same locality, the same area, but your land is close to a big drain. People are not ready to prepare to pay the same amount of money as they pay for a property or land near a big drain, as they would be ready to pay at a place where there's no big drain. So these are some of the things which affects the value of property or value of land. Now, you mentioned an issue about a glut. You mentioned an issue about a glut in the market. I would say that there are different markets also for different kinds of properties.
Yeah.
So, for example, high-end flats, which sell maybe $300,000 and above, located in places like airports, Rich, this is Accra, the market in Accra,
Yeah.
Laboni, and other places. That is one kind of market. Another markets for people who are just working or workers. So the first class market is really for high income earners and expatriates. That's where they stay and also are prepared to pay rents as high as from $1,500, $3,000. Even some places pay up to about $4,000, $5,000. That is one kind of market. But there's another market for people who are working class and not that they are poor, but they cannot afford the markets as in airports, but have maybe 1,500 cities, 2,000 cities, 3,000 cities.
Pay for it, even a two-bedroom flat. I would say that that kind of property is rare. Is rare or is not common. There's a market for that kind of property. Two-bedroom apartments, two-bedroom flats, two-bedroom building.
On its own, what we call in Ghana a self-compound. People are looking for that kind of property at a good location. It shouldn't be too far away from the center of town, because most of those people who earn that kind of money also drive to work, so they can afford to spend an hour in traffic to drive to work. But if it's too far, about 2 hours, 3 hours, it's more difficult for them. So I would say that I would not agree with you that there's a glut, but there may be a glut in the upper end market, but in another kind of markets, there's no glut. There's actually a big need for those kind of properties, and people are looking for those kind of properties.
Okay.
Have I said enough?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think you have, given us a good brief. I think the most important message I've taken out of that is that there are different markets, and indeed there are different markets. Some can afford, some cannot afford. If even you went to Makola or to Accra Mall, I guess different people shop in different places depending on what they can afford. So that is very much appreciated. Now, moving on to what I actually talked about, I think we all have some sort of valuation land economy experience, and therefore the question I would put is it justified that we are not selling freehold land? And I will go around and ask all of you briefly, because now technically we don't have any freehold land available. And that obviously flows from, the Nigerian chief of Ijebu, who said that land belongs to those who are living, those who are dead, and those generations yet unborn. And the concept behind that is, if you're a chief or you are a family head today, you are only a custodian. So if those who came before you sold freehold, you would not have had anything today to sell. So the whole concept is you are able to hold on to the land, sell it leasehold for some people to use it, and then it comes back to the family for future generations to also benefit. And I think even generally as an African principle, it is critical because it helps us to be able to keep I'm not thinking I'm that boring, Mr. Edwin now, but anyway.
No, you're not. Just
It helps us to keep our land, because that is what brings conflict in the long term, where the natives lose their land entirely. But then we must also acknowledge that as a factor of production, land requires to be brought into profitable use, and people must be able to use the land to actually help it moving. So, Mr. Duonna, what is your view? The fact that you cannot get any freehold to buy now, briefly.
Yeah, this is a very difficult, a tough one to. If I look at the experience here where I am, I probably will say it's not a good idea that we don't have to sell freeholds. But I also understand that the cultural differences are there between here and then Ghana. The concept in Ghana is that we have tribes or families that have identity, and they are located in a particular place. That is what defines them. And for the future, everybody have to be in that particular community or kind of associated with it. In the US, it's different. The whole country is for every American. So you can relocate to any place and you will feel American. We don't have that kind of cultural differences. If it's there, I mean, don't get me wrong, but we don't identify somebody as, for example, being a New Yorker and kind of belonging to a particular tribe. And so New York is his place for the rest of his life. It's not like that. You can move around freely and you will be American. So there's one identity, American. In Ghana, it's not like that. If we have gotten to the point where everybody will identify as Ghanaian, and we forget about our tribal differences, then yes, I will say, oh, then we should allow people to be able to acquire freehold in any part of the country, and that will be fine. But as I said from the beginning, there are differences. The land and the location identify who we are. And until we get to that stage where we will forget about our differences and say, hey, we are Ghanaian. This is our identity. It doesn't matter if I'm Ashanti, Ewe, the Gare, wherever, Ga or something. I don't care about that. Actually, it will be diminished and we are just Ghanaian simplicity. Then, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Osai Kranti, what's your view? I think we're having a few technical challenges with Mr. Mensago, but he's still with us, and therefore, from time to time, he would join us, but he still can hear us and can contribute if need be. Mr. Kranti.
Yes, I thank you, Nana. I also subscribe to the fact that family lands, uh, stool lands, clan lands are not supposed to be sold freehold, because as you pointed out, I mean the land is not only for the current generation, but the generation gets unborn. And if you sell freehold, means that the land is gone forever. It will never come back to the family. And therefore, and that is I think that is one of the reasons why, in the Constitution, specifically at Article 266, where, after the 1969, all freeholds that were held by non-citizens were actually, reduced to leasehold. And that is a good thing, because, and fine, if it is an individual who has a freehold and wants to dispose it of, there's no problem, there's no qualms about that. But if it is a family land, because whoever, there's two, or a chief or a family head, is in that fiduciary position, and therefore it must be accountable to the family and then even those yet unborn. And therefore, I think that, properties, for family lands and for stool lands, they should not be sold freehold. But for individual lands, if you have a freehold in it, you can dispose it of.
Okay. So, Mr. Mensago, I guess you are at the front end of things, selling these lands. What is your feedback? Is it perhaps advantageous or disadvantageous that we are not selling freehold? And what do you think about this thing? Because now we are locked in.
Okay, from what I've seen on the ground, people who have freeholds sell the freeholds. So if I have land, for example, in let me say Dansuman, which is a freehold, and I want to sell it on to somebody else, I can sell it on and I give him a freehold. But somebody who is educated in the markets would say that, well, why do I sell a freehold on? I'd rather sell for a leasehold for a period of, say, maybe 70 years or 99 years. So when I am gone, my family can also enjoy the benefits of the land.
Yeah.
So on the markets, I would say that freeholds are still being sold by those who have freeholds, or they are able to transfer the freehold to another person, and those documents are registered. And then those who have been advised decide that, well, they rather not sell the freehold, but sell for a certain period, and then their future generations can also enjoy the benefits of the same land and not lose it.
Okay. I would go on to just some of the questions we've had. I think I've got Miranda Texan, Perpetua Smeni, Janet Mante, Kwesi Wilson, Sarah Kumoji, a couple of guys saying kudos. I've got people liking Eric's Ankoma Joseph, Patience Ado saying it's very educative. We've got Isaac Okwe Alote as well saying Eric's argument on the I think the spousal rights under the Land Act, saying that it was a good submission, as well with Francis Otu as well. So it looks like people are very happy about the fact that the women now have a right to their husbands. Well, I guess it's cut both ways. So both you can have very rich women and then and then the man not so well to do. So I can understand that. We have Adam Jehuri saying, I agree with the suggestion to serialize the Land Act discussion. So that is definitely coming soon to you so that we can actually go into the meat of the individual provisions of the Act. Adam Jehuri again says, it's my suggestion that property values in Ghana, irrespective of the market, are not realistic. We don't seem to have any comparable for properties, even in the same market. Okay, so Mr. Aggor, please note that I think we're going to have a debate on that. That's from Adam Jehuri. And then Kwesi Wilson says, please, how come the land system in Kumasi is different from Accra? Aren't they all using the same act? Okay. And then we have one from Mary Leona Kwashi. I couldn't get that enough. But we have another Prince Kafui Mensa Anachu. Can you get freehold through gift and judgment debt? That's an interesting one. I think that would go to Eric.
I didn't get it. I didn't get it. Can you come again?
He says, can you get freehold through gift and judgment debt? Okay,
Of
so
course.
that's Mensa. And then Jemima Nyaku says, worth listening. There's a thumbs up or fire. And then we have Enyo Studios, says very informative and educative. So, and then Edward Akufu says, great show. Can you give us some specifics on property values in various cities? So I guess we would stop here and I'll continue when we answer these questions. So that I'll take Eric's point first, and that is a question from Mr. Mensa, Prince Kafui Mensa Anachu, asking, can you get freehold through a gift or judgment debt?
Of course, you can. You can if you are litigating a land over which there is a freehold.
Yeah.
And it's an individual land. It is not a family land, or it's not a stool land that has this restraint that you cannot. If it is a stool land, you cannot give a freehold. If it is an individual land, you can have a freehold if you get judgment on it. Because of course you cannot have what you don't, or nobody can give you what you don't have. So if it is a freehold, you can have the freehold. But if it is a leasehold, there's no way you can get a freehold.
You can tell it. Okay, that's thank you very much for that. So, Mr. Mensango, you're going to take this question from Adam Jehuri, who is saying that irrespective of the market. So you gave us scenarios of Dansuman, and he's saying irrespective of the market, we don't seem to have comparables. And I would add on to this. Now, where we got our concept of valuation from, I believe, is in England. So on the street in England, you have 100 properties of the same size, of the same room shape, bathrooms in the same place. The only difference you have perhaps is somebody has a different paint or has a different carpet or different furniture. So it is easy to value property using the comparable method. Now in Ghana's case, almost every property that you visit is different. So I think the point that Mr. Jehuri is making is that the concept of comparable methods in valuation as a theory is not easy to adapt to Ghana because every property is different. Unless, for instance, we're using contractor's test. If you're using contractor's test, then you're looking at the brick and mortar and what you've actually put together to build the building. But we're not doing that. So how assured are we that our values are actually true and proper and reflect what ought to have been the case? And I think that's speaking to Mr. Jehuri's question.
Okay, so as I said in the beginning, all these things or values are actually related to the markets. It relates to what people have actually paid for property on the ground.
Yeah.
So on the markets. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that even though the values are not readily available, if you look closely, you would find something. For example, Mr. Eric Osai does valuation. He may have done 2 sales in a certain location, or even 1 sale. So if I'm working in, let's use maybe East Legon Hills, and I call him that, oh, Eric, how much, have you done any transaction in this neighborhood? He says yes. What did you sell? He gives me the details of what he sold. We can use the word, if he sold maybe a plot of size 0.23, I can expand it to an acre. Say that the land value at East Legon Hills per acre is worth this amount of money. And then I can also find out for another person. So the sales go on. What you have to do is to do a little more groundwork and be able to find out what is actually happening on the ground.
Okay.
So we call those methods, that's market comparison.
Yeah.
But there's also another method, which is the income capitalization.
Yeah.
How much are people renting or paying for this? I'm not going to use the word renting. How much income is this property generating? That's one we really use for rental properties. So a 2-bedroom property, even though they may be differently shaped, maybe they have a total floor area of about 150 square meters. Some may be 158, some may be 140, but they will all have the same, a similar floor area. So with that information, how much people are paying for, you can also generate a figure of how much people are paying per square meter for that kind of property. So it's not that the values are there, but it takes more work to find them. And then the common one we use, because we say there's no data, is the depreciated replacement cost. As how much will it cost to build a certain property? So what we do is add the construction costs and depreciate for use, or what we call obsolescence. So maybe the function the property can perform, because it was built 10 years ago, some places may be old, so there are some methods to use to take care of obsolescence. Then we add the land value and say that property in this area is selling or is worth this amount. Or if you have to construct a building of maybe 3-bedroom house or a total floor area of this is how much it will cost you to build. So even though, so that's one part of it. So that's how we say that generally we do valuations in Ghana. The second part about values being high, I will say that the market is prepared to pay. For example, let me use a place we call East Legon Hills. East Legon Hills is not East Legon. It's for those who were not able to go to East Legon. There's a well laid out area. After East Legon, there's Ajingano, there's Ashalibotri, and there was a vast land where it was properly set out and well laid out. So people are prepared to pay $20,000 is approximately 150,000 Ghana cedis for a plot of land of size, let's say 0.18 of an acre. People 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I know somebody who sold one for 155,000 Ghana cedis. Last year in October, another person sold one for 172,000 cedis.
So
I know somebody.
If I could interject here.
Yes.
It appears that when we speak to the common person, these people who can afford that amount of dollars to buy land, we don't know them. Do they exist? Are people, are they our next door neighbors? Are they our friends? Or they're people from without? Like, they come from South Africa or come from England, or are there people in Ghana who are affording these? Or is it, for instance, post year of return, people have become interested and people are buying? What is your feeling? What is the market that actually can afford the high end? Because I think that is the narrative that is going on. The high end is moving, and I think ultimately the low end would also catch up. Now, who are those affording that? And I don't mean names, but what do they? Are they politicians? Are they clergy? Are they religious people? Are they professionals? Can you please just shed some light on that?
Okay, so I would say that those buying cut across all the sectors you mentioned. A few politicians may buy, so that we don't sound controversial. And then people who are abroad also buy. Some people have stayed abroad for. Let me make a note that most of the buyers are not. They've not just finished school, or they are not 25 years old. most people maybe 40, 45, even 50. Because to purchase land, you have to put in a large sum of money.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world, to purchase land is a huge investment for a family, for a new group of people. So for a family, for example, who have worked living in Ghana, by the time you are 50 years or 55, they have reached a certain point in their occupation, a certain level in their occupation, and have saved over time to purchase land. Okay. So it's people plan to purchase or save towards the purchase. Yeah. And sometimes too, people may have, so I'll say that Ghanaians who live in Ghana buy, people from abroad buy. And then, so as I said earlier on, there are different kinds of markets and different levels. There's land in Dodowa where you can pay 15,000 cedis. Okay. You can buy land in Dodowa for 15,000 cedis. 15,000 cedis is about $3,000.
Yeah.
So we have a theory we call the time distance consideration. Mm-hmm. The closer you are to the central city, the more you pay. This theories work in Ghana, it works everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So the closer you are to the central city or the central business district, you pay higher. So in Ghana, the market works from, let's say, Rage. As you're coming out of Rage, you get to East Legon. Rage is higher than East Legon, and you go back towards Medina or towards Dansuman, you pay a little less. You go towards Kaswa, you pay less. So as you are also going out of the city, note that you may have problems with roads, you may have problems with drainage, you may have problems with electricity, you have problems with internet, and those kind of things. So some people rather prefer to save more, to save over a longer period of time, and come closer to the city, where they can enjoy the benefits of owning land, rather than going far away, where they have to drive for 2 hours to get to the city, to go drive again 2 hours to go back home. So I would say that the market is segmented. There are those who buy at the high end, there are those who buy at the middle, and there are those who buy at the low end.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go on to the next question, which is, I think it comes to you, Mr. Mensah again. It says, can you give some, this is from Edward Akufu, can you give some specifics on property values in various cities? So I guess briefly, if you do have a comparison of what values are, comparatively between Accra and some other cities.
Okay, you see, as I explained earlier on, I have seen somebody purchase land in a place, let me use it again, it's Legon Hills, for approximately $30,000, about 172,000 cedis. That's what I've seen. But as I explained earlier on, it's like a circle. The center of the circle, the prices are higher.
Yeah.
As you go back,
do you have in your practice any experience? Perhaps Eric as well might chip in. Do you have in your practice any experience of land being sold in Kumasi or Takoradi and how much is sold for? I think that's what the question is pushing to.
It's about. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For now, I would say I don't have land values or information on land values in other cities.
Okay.
I have information on Accra.
Accra. So you are the Don of Accra. Mr. Osai Koranteng, do you have any evidence of some values in other cities?
No. Normally, the property is localized. So those in those regions will be able to provide you with exact figures. And most of the time, if we embark on valuation, we have to follow on our colleagues in those other localized markets to feed us with those comparables.
Okay. Well, I think that you're being very, very ethical, and that's very good. That you operate in a market where you actually have knowledge, and so Prof. Akufu, unfortunately, we couldn't give you that information, but I should be able to find something for you later on. I have got a question here about Yao Chum asking, I have a freehold, how do I secure them? I presume that is more of, if you already have the freehold, then it's a matter of registering it. So, Mr. Chum, that is, we've got a comment from Bright Donko saying he likes this. And then we have Daniel Nisiabuachi saying this is informative, sorry. And then Mrs. Miranda Texan is saying, if Mr. and Mrs. A buy a house together, what happens when they divorce? Well, I guess it depends on the circumstances of the marriage, and sometimes it will be split 50-50. Some other times, if they've got other properties, it will be shared amongst them. And then we have a question from, or a statement from Francis Otu. It says, good presentation. Some freehold require the consent of the other spouse when one whose name is on the registered document or certificate. I couldn't get that. I think it's more speaking to the Land Act and the fact that,
Yes.
the spouse's name might not be on the document, but they still need the consent. But there are parts, and the reason why I say we should go into the Land Act more fully subsequently in other programs is that
Now,
there are parts.
if
Sorry?
I may chip in, what he's saying is captured in the Act, in the Land Act.
Okay.
The Act says that unless to the contrary, when property is acquired during the pendency of the marriage and it is registered in a spouse's name, it is deemed as joint property. So irrespective of the fact that it has been registered in the spouse name, it doesn't mean that it belongs to just spouse alone. It belongs to the spouse in the marriage. So that has been captured by the Act.
I think there's a part as well in the Act, and I have to do some research on it, which actually says that if the parties have actually, so at the point of registration, if the parties have said that the other spouse would not benefit, then they can get free of it. But don't quote me on this. We would actually do a more informative show on that and then cover that matter.
And then before you go on, that is actually a good provision in the law, but I'm just kind of wondering aloud, isn't that venturing into family law? What is the family law position on couples owning property? I don't know if it's the appropriate place for this kind of things to be addressed, or it should be addressed in the Land Act. It's already there anyway, but I just wanted to see what is the perspective from the family law in Ghana regarding this. Is it in conflict with this one, or are they in kind of uniform conformity?
Well, I guess the family law, if whatever provisions we have for family law, unless it conflicts with what is in the Land Act, then the Land Act holds supreme. So previously, some of these things would have, just as Eric said, would have come through decisions of the courts and how marital assets are split. And I guess if you're married, it's only proper that you do things together. That is what you got yourself into.
Right.
So that is what the law is trying to do. That if you're married, you have almost swore an oath or joined yourself together, and if you have property, then you should share. So it shouldn't be that a wife or a husband has property and is hiding it from the other. So that is what the law is trying to get in. If I can understand it very well. Let me go through a few questions, and I'll come to you, Mr. Duon, now, because we won't let you off with the land administration project. We have Mary Leona Kwashi says very educative, needs such enlightenment often. And then Enyo Studio says, haha, those buying are not below 25 years old. So I think that is with Mr. Aggor saying that they're very old, experienced people who buy. And to be fair, we build incrementally. There's good research to show that the average Ghanaian doesn't build instantly. You build over 20, 30 years. You get your blocks and then you go gradually. So I guess that is also found in what Mr. Aggor was sharing with us. So, Mr. Duona, briefly on the land administration project. I believe that is what has now tapered into the Land Act, which we are discussing and which we hope to discuss further in programs on its own. Do you think the land administration project has been successful? Your view?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I would say yes and no. In terms of the concept, I would say yes, it has achieved its objectives. The objective was to bring all the different agencies into one single big agency, and then to streamline their business processes so that customers will not have to interface with different agencies and pay different fees and probably get confusion somewhere in the middle of it. And to also introduce technology that will facilitate modern processing. To that aspect, I think I will probably say yes, 90%. There are challenges I learned from the technology implementation, for example, which is kind of understandable. Every huge technology project, especially when it is the first time, always has its own challenges, but it will improve over time. So yes, it has achieved a greater success.
Okay. Wonderful. So we have another comment from Stella Nanabrago Osetutu saying very educative. We need to have more of these discussions. So I think we are getting to, we've had our questions and then we've answered them to the best of our ability. Mr. Dwona, do you have any, what are your last comments? I think that today is Independence Day.
Okay.
And what is, I guess, what I want to tease out of you is where do you see Ghana land and property going? You are somebody who is a professional in the field. From what you know, from what your own engagement is, today we are 64 years. Next year will be 65. What do you see as becoming, or what do you think we can achieve in the years ahead, looking at where we've come from and where we are today?
Um, Unfortunately, I see some kind of confusion in the future. I say this because with the leasing that we have imposed upon ourselves, when the first batch of leases expires, can you imagine what is going to happen? And the family says we're not going to renew the leases. The children have grown and taken over the property. We have to think about that. Not that I'm kind of projecting that there will be some legal fighting, but it is something we have to kind of think through.
Yeah.
Yeah. You left out. I don't want to go into too much details with that, so I will just switch over
Okay,
from
that,
there.
that that's very true, and it has been one of my concerns for a very long time. I actually did a paper on it,
Yeah.
and then we have almost found a solution halfway, which is that the Land Act provides for the renewals, but I don't think we've actually gone to the final step. So it
Right.
is something that obviously is worth discussing. What happens when the leases end? Because now we have
Exactly.
majority leases being sold, and so we
Right.
have that. So that's a fair point.
And the original owners then discover that, oh, the land has returned to us, and
Yeah,
these people need to negotiate with us to get a new one.
yeah,
That's going to be a tough one.
yeah.
But there was a question that probably we skipped. Somebody asked, how is it that we have different type of processes of land in Kumasi and in Accra?
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
please do come in then.
Well, we do have different ownerships. In Accra, we have family lands, and then we have two lands and the state of vested lands. In Kumasi, I think we don't have family lands. We only have vested lands and stool lands, and then state lands, right? So each of these has a different process, and that is why you see different processes um, for these lands in different places. We can't go into detail because of time, but that is, in a nutshell, that is the reason. The ownerships are different and the processes are different.
That's very true. I think I have said on this show before that when you buy land, mainly in Ashanti region, you're just given a site plan and not in a receipt, and that's good enough. But in other places, even with the legal documents, it becomes problematic. Okay, so Mr. Osai, I guess I would ask you the same question. We are 64 years today. Not that you are or I am, but our country is 64 years today. How do you see it? We have come all the way from Mensa Saba to the Aboriginal Rights Protection Society through independence and all the laws and the lessons that we've learned. Today we have the Land Act and we have the Real Estate Agency Act. How do you see Ghana going forward when it comes to land and property?
I think that these two acts are monumental, in helping us to shape up, our real estate sector. One thorny issue which we had was the bane of this against fraud to these unsuspecting investors who, always fall far of these estate developers who, do not are not licensed, and they just go about their duties perpetuating fraud. So this, is good one. Of course, that's where the real estate practice, was becoming a breeding ground for money laundering, is well addressed in this act. With the Land Act, I think that it is a good one because the Land Act is a compendium of existing acts, and now have been consolidated into one legislation, and therefore makes it very easy to assess, and also removes all these overlaps and inconsistencies that we've had with a lot of laws regarding land. So it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before I go to Mr. Mensah, and I hope he wouldn't drop this time so we can see his face well. I wasn't that lucky. But there is a statement saying, do you have any intention to broadcast this show on local TV station? Many people need this information. That is from Prince Kafi Mensah Anachu. Definitely, I mean, I am open if we do get that platform, because I think it's very important that we are educated in these matters. And I think with education, the system would correct itself. Whatever errors there are would be corrected if we do have such a platform. So yes, I am very keen and will be able to do that. Then there is another comment from Enyo Studio saying, can't something be done about how non-citizens can own lands here in Ghana, because they don't offer us same opportunities in their country? Well, I guess it's a fair point that others don't offer Ghanaians the same opportunities, but perhaps it is also not entirely true, because if you have the money, if you can afford $240,000 to buy a house in East Legon or Trasaco, you can also, I presume, buy the same property in the USA or in England, wherever. So, but it is a point as to how, for me, I think what we should actually look at is not so much about non-citizens buying property, but how we can make that acquisition part of our system, such that we benefit. Things like, for instance, large-scale property development, which does not go with infrastructure development in the neighborhood. So I think Mr. Mensah has some experience with Trasaco, and there was a video circulating on social media not long ago. A lady was saying that the road right in front of Trasaco was so bad that it begged belief that everybody is buying houses $600,000 and over, but the main road leading up to that place wasn't the best. I also once went to North Industrial Area in Accra, and there's a very big, wonderful edifice, a religious institution there, and the road leading up to it was so poor. So, the investment is good. We can get the investment in, but I think that large-scale investors should actually contribute towards the infrastructure. You can't go to cantonments and get a plot which had two-bedroom property on previously, build 60 units, and expect that Ghana Water and Ghana Highways and everybody would scale up the infrastructure to meet up your demand. They should be able to put in some money. There should be a demand. Like in the UK, we have Section 106 agreements that are more planning requirements. So they must put some money in, rather than just circle yourself and have a gated community, and outside the gate is all untarred road with all potholes and all that. They should at least be able to be responsible for a stretch of road that leads right up from their front gates to the main road, or should be responsible, for instance, to provide some sort of water supply, underground water tanks or overhead water tanks. So what comes from Ghana Water and Sewage actually augments it. So I think there's a bigger discussion to be had about non-citizens acquiring land and perhaps large-scale development, because there should be it should be quid pro quo. There should be something. There should be something that benefits us as well. Mr. Mensah, we are not having luck with your video, but I would nonetheless come to you for your comment as to how you see the country going forward? 64 years, next year will be 65. How do you see the land and property sector? Do we have everything ready? We have the Land Act now, we have the Real Estate Agency Act. Are we all ready and set for prime time, or you think there are things that we still need to do going forward that will get us to the promised land?
Well, I think that the laws are good, but it's now time to make the laws work. The registration processes should work properly. So when people buy property, they can register them and have good title to it. The courts should also work properly so that people who make double sale of lands can be jailed. Thieves, the whole system which gets involved in double sales should be punished. Officials of the Lands Commission who also register these documents and create conflicts between two different parties, all those who are culpable should also be jailed. When we do these things, the system will change.
Yeah.
I also think that we should take land use planning seriously. If a whole area, before land is sold, the place should be well laid out before the land is sold. Even if the roads and the water systems, electricity cannot be developed, at least let there be a good layout before the lands are sold. When we do these things, the neighborhood looks well, the environment looks well, there's aesthetic beauty. People can begin to appreciate what is happening to land in the neighborhood. So I think that from now going forward, we spent a lot of time I'll say that we are in a disorganized state, but from now on, let us begin to organize properly. Let land use planning work so that our land system can make sense. The markets also, as I said before, the land values are determined by demand and supply and actual sales on the ground. So plan, prepare, and buy at a good place, so that because the land you buy mainly or will be for the rest of your life. So prepare, save towards buying land at a good place, so that when you buy land at a place, you'll be happy.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Let me say it like this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this has been a very informative show. We are all in a celebratory mood, being that today is 64th independence anniversary. We have covered the history of land and property from Saba's time right up through to independence, 1969, 1992. We've covered the land administration project, which I guess many people are not aware of. Is responsible for the improvements that we found to this date. And then we've also covered the Land Act and then the Real Estate Agency Act. I guess I would make that promise to actually serialize these two acts going forward, so we can actually get into the meat of it, know what our responsibilities are, what our obligations are, and then we can actually be empowered going forward. I do say that for those of you watching on Facebook, please don't forget to like our page, and then for those of you watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. You can also send us your questions through info@landpropertyfocus.com. Our website has the ability for you to also subscribe to whatever messages that we do send. Periodically, we do send summaries of our shows, so that if you don't want to sit through and listen to a long show, you may just have the snapshot. And I'm going to do that right after this show as well. So please do follow us on Facebook, and please make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. And do share widely in your circles, and make sure they also do that, so we can all learn, have a discussion, and be empowered when it comes to land and property issues in Ghana. So my last thing would be to thank my guests who have taken their time out. Today being Independence Day, perhaps it would have been best if you were marching somewhere on one of the squares, but you have taken time to be here, and therefore I'm very thankful to you, Mr. Rafiq Naah, who is a land information systems consultant, Mr. Eric Koranteng, who is a valuation and estate surveyor as well as a lawyer, so he's got two hats on, and then Mr. Kodzo Aggor, who is a valuation and estate surveyor in private practice. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that when we put up another show like this, you will join us. And please don't forget to send us your questions. If you do have any idea, any suggestions, let us have them as well. And we'll try as much as possible to do our research and come back to you so that we would all be empowered. Thank you very much for joining us.